Welcome to this demonstration of OTM, the Online Translation Manager. OTM is software as a service. This means that the software is provided through the internet. It's not installed on any local machine. The data is kept on a secure server in the internet. Also, quite importantly, it's not in the cloud. What we're looking at is a landing page of a fictitious agency which we created for the very purpose of running demonstrations and running presentations of OTM. It's called My Language Services, MyLS in short, which you can see also in the URLs on the system. So all the hyperlinks contain MyLS, and we're going to use My Language Services as our agency today. MyLS is also used by OTM support for training purposes and also for the purpose of running sample projects, which you can request in order to acquaint yourself with the software supported by OTM staff. Now, this landing page shows you the various parts of OTM which we're going to take a look at. Predominantly, we're going to spend time on the project management interface. We're also going to look at resource service pages, which are used for resources, meaning translators, proofreaders, editors, DTP people, and similar resources to connect to the agency, as well as customer service pages, which are created for customers to connect and to be able to upload and download files and materials safely. We're going to start with the OTM website, which is provided for OTM licensees, which can be used to publish terms and conditions, but also for customers walking in from the web to request a quote. Okay, let's have a look at what a customer sees when they come in from the internet. This is a form which is provided either as a separate website, or it can be integrated into your own corporate website using a frame. Now, this requires prospective or existing customers to provide certain details. As you can see, some of them are shown in bold, specifically the name, the telephone number, and the email. Details you will need in order to get back to any potential customer, or in order to clarify things regarding the assignment. Now here we've got a customer called LSP.net GmbH requesting a quote for a translation on a project. Let's call this the test project, and let's say it's topic area. Now these are all optional details. The various services which are available can be shown, and the languages. Note that this is not a list, a formal list. It's a free format field, and that's on purpose in order to provide potential customers with a field to enter what they think they need. So if there is something you need to discuss, you get a chance to discuss it with them. Volume is optional as well. Let's provide something. And of course the requested deadline, which surprisingly is as soon as possible. It is possible to add additional information, such as please use the agreed terminology, or other information that might be interesting. And it is possible to send the quote request without uploading any files. Now this is in order to accommodate people who might be reluctant to upload a file to a site that they have never been to, or you can upload between 1 and 10 files in order to provide the basis for the project, and that's what we're going to do right now. The details are summarized again. Let's choose the file. Going to select our own OTM guide. Again, I can provide additional information, and I upload the file and submit the quote request. Note that even though this customer might never have been in contact with you before, might never have done any business with you before, the upload is already encrypted, and the files are stored on a secure server. Now the details of the request are shown here, are summarized here, and are also sent to the customer in a confirmation email confirming acceptance of the quote request. We're now going to take the view of a project manager working for MyLS. Again, we're starting from the landing page, and we're going to have a look at the project management interface. Not surprising, there is a login required. My name is now Max Manager. I'm one of the project managers working for my LS. Should I have forgotten my password, there's always a link where you can retrieve it. Now this is the project management interface of OTM. Before we go into any details, what we note straight away is that there's a new request which has just been submitted. This is the request that has just been submitted using the web form, and that's what we're going to deal with in a moment. Taking a look across the screen, you have the main menu items on the top in the blue fields, above which you will find a project finder that you can use to enter a project number or a fragment of a project number, customer name, project name, whatever it takes to retrieve the project you're looking for quickly. News holds news submitted by OTM support, and of course you can reload the page with this. Current time and date. The time zone can be adapted using the user preferences, where you can also change the language of the project management interface from English to German or Spanish, and where you can make some other settings. Now this is the task board, which contains the tasks to be done by the project manager. At the moment, Max Manager needs to look after a new quote request that has come in, as well as an email that is waiting to be looked at. Let's have a look at the list of quotations. Now this shows all the open and pending quotes that we're working on right now. As you can see, OTM uses a traffic light system, red, amber and green, to signal certain statuses in the system. If a task has been completed or a subtask, that is shown in green, such as here the quote request submitted by Mr. Forster. The quote request has been assigned to a project manager and it's been read, but it's still awaiting creation of a quote, whereas the first quote request that we've just been looking at is still awaiting assignment of a project manager. We're going to do that in a moment. And of course we have the list of orders that we're working at the moment, orders that we've received from the customer. As we can see, test project number 1 has a job assigned and the files have been delivered. What it's waiting for, as shown by the red color, is an invoice. On the other hand, we have an order down here where no job has been assigned but payment has been received. The solution to that question is that this customer is set in the administration section to be required to make prepayment. So the system controls that payment has been received before you can work on the jobs. Well, let's go back to the task board. Now let's take a look at this project request that we're working on here. First of all, the project number. This is assigned automatically by the system. The first 3 characters denote the OTM licensee, in this case my language service. P stands for project. DE shows that the customer is based in Germany. 1105 is May 2011, and then there's a sequential project number. Under that project number you will always find a project specific menu, which, because we haven't done any work on the project, is still rather empty. And you always find a button that leads you to the project summary, where you can control the project, add data, go to other functions, and so on. We see the details of the potential customer, including telephone number as submitted. We see that 1 new file has been uploaded. We see it's a new request that needs to be worked on. And we see a warning or a note by the system: watch it, this customer may already be in the system. What seems to have happened here is that a customer who has a service page did not use it, but chose instead to walk straight into the form that's on the web, and to avoid any duplicates in the customer database. That's why the system is providing a warning here and is asking, are you sure this is a new customer? Are you really sure? There's several possibilities from here. It might in fact be a new customer, in which case OTM will of course let you create a new customer record. It just needs you just need to make sure that you don't create too many duplicates. It's also possible that this refers to an existing record, and that's the case here. It's the sample customer. That's exactly the person, and we will attribute the quote request to that selected contact person. If it was just a similarity or an identical company name, for example, but in fact a different contact, then of course you would apply a new contact person. So we attribute that quote request to the selected contact person, and in this way we have avoided creating a duplicate. So let's have a look at the project summary. This gives you an overview of everything that is related to the project. We see up here the various details, including a note on the customer, where you can leave a note in there, note telling other project managers that Max called on the 10th of May to discuss terms. We have a timestamp, we have an IP address, so you can get an indication of where this project originates from. We have the customer data address and of course the project specific data, including the additional details that were provided. There is a link to send an email straight away to the customer in case something's missing or it's a file format that you cannot work with straight away. And we have the current file in the file repository. Let's have a look at it. It's a PDF file, and in fact it's just our OTM brochure that we're looking at. So typically in a real life environment you would download this file to your system, you would analyze it, you would count it, you would quantify the amount of work that's in there. If there's several files uploaded, you can always use a zip download to get all those files to your local system. But of course, whatever you do, the files will remain in the centralized file repository on OTM. You could consider that as some sort of backup. Now the first step which we need to do, as indicated by the red underline here, is to assign the quote request. In fact, Max Manager is going to assign this to himself. For those of you who work on their own, if you only have one project manager in the system, then this is a step that can be skipped because the system will automatically assign it to you. So we've read the quote request already. So what we need to do is to create a quote. Now this is the screen we use to start preparing a quote, and very often in OTM what you will see is that there are default entries which are provided, some of which are there in the system by default, some of which you may have created using the administration section. But in almost all cases it is possible to edit this. For example, if I want to take out Germany, I can do that. If I want to add a little bit of a personal touch, adding good to hear from you again, I can do that. You can change that detail, those details. You can use a standard address from the customer master data. You can change the project language, and of course you can change the currency which will be chosen by default to match the customer's location. You will notice that we only have 4 currencies here. Now this is a setting which we also created in the administration part. OTM handles more than 30 currencies. We just chose to use a list of 4 so that we don't have to scroll through a big list every time. We can also define areas of specialization, which will then subsequently, when we outsource a job under this project, will then be used as a preset filter. Now the next thing you need to do is to create a line item. As soon as you change something, you will notice that the system tells you changes have not yet been saved. It's a good idea to save from time to time. Line items can be created manually, or you can import a line item list. Now this can be based on a previous project for the same or different customer, or it can be a line item list which you created as a default setup, as a template for a specific type of customer, or even as a price list, if you will. Here we're going to create a line item manually, and as you can see, it's possible to create multiple copies of the same item, which is pretty handy when you're working on multiple language pairs, but with line items that are otherwise identical. And here we're selecting languages using a list or using shortcuts, which again, you may have guessed, can be customized. Note that again we have default texts on the bottom right, which change depending on the service we're selecting here. So there are different default text blocks depending on the type of service you're checking. In this case, we're going to have a look at English to German and its complex specialized contexts and demanding marketing texts. Again, these are defaults which, if I so wish, I can change. Okay, and I can delete the field content altogether if I want to start over. I need to quantify the file. I have now counted it in the background. I found out it's 1150 words. Of course, you can set the default for your typical quantification. We can either set a price per volume unit, or we could set a flat rate, and in either case we can check this box by indicating that these are approximate lines, which is pretty handy when you're invoicing on a per target line basis, for example, or if you're quoting on the basis of a rather badly scanned PDF where you have a rough idea of what it might be, but you really don't know. Tax settings are typically customized on a per invoice basis. If need be, you can also change the tax settings for each individual line item. So here's our line item. We could create additional ones. Once you created a line item, you can also create copies, clones as we call them. And of course we need to tell our customers how long we're going to take and some other options. Customers request a deadline, a little reminder from the request ASAP. Well, we have a text block which does it rather neatly. You would say, okay, 2 to 4 business days. We can add an order form so a customer can fax back. In our case, we're going to use an online order that they can use in order to place their order online in the system. There's lots of other text blocks which you can choose. You can choose the sequence in which they appear. You can choose whether or not they should be checked by default, so you can really customize it to your needs. You can add your company profile, your general terms and conditions, and as we've seen before, you could add an order form if you wish to do that. Once again, save, and now let's preview what we've created here. Within a matter of a few minutes, we've created a pretty professional looking quote. That quote will be created in the form of a PDF, which is attached to a cover email sent to the customer. Again, as you may have imagined, you can add some additional text. And of course this takes time. That's why you can also edit the default for this cover email by adding this sentence if you want to have it in there by default. You could add additional files, for example an analysis, and before we send it off, a final glance at what we've quoted, and we create and send the quote document as a PDF. The quote has now been sent out as a PDF attachment to the cover email and can be reviewed by the customer. They will look at this. They could of course come back to you and ask you for clarification. You can send another quote if that's necessary. And once everybody's happy to go ahead, then the customer can use this link to place their online order, which will take them straight to their login page. Of course, they need to provide their password, and that takes them straight to the online order form, where once again if they want, they can have a look at the order. They need to accept the general terms and conditions and provide their name and place a binding order. Order has been submitted. Let's have a look what the project manager does with that. And here we are. We have status order received, and here we see the purchase order that the customer has provided. That's what it looks like. And we have the name in there with the online order. So we can set this job to order status, and with this we have completed the first phase of a project, from the receipt of a quote request to submission of a quote and receipt of order. we have completed the first phase of a project, from the receipt of a quote request to submission of a quote and receipt of order. Now we've got an order. The first thing we need to do is we need to set the project time. As you remember, we quoted between 2 and 4 business days. So let's say we're now confirming the 13th of May. And of course we need to set an internal job deadline. This applies as a default to jobs which we outsource under this project. Once again, a confirmation email is sent to the customer. As with almost all the confirmation emails, I can decide not to send it, depending on the circumstances. Normally I would, but there are some customers who don't want to receive too many emails, or if you're working on a standing order or on standing conditions where you don't need to go through a formal quote, then you would not send out the quote and the confirmation, but you would just use that as a preparation for invoicing. Note that all the details which you captured so far will in fact at the end of the project serve as your basis for invoicing, so there's no need to recapture again or to drag out some little cards or something like that. So we confirm the project timeline, which is then shown on the left up here. Customer will get an email confirming this. Now the next thing to do is to assign a job. We need to find somebody who's going to do that job, so we create a new job. And again we need to select which service this is supposed to refer to. OTM gives you full freedom in creating and arranging your process flow. So if you just have a single job process flow, because it's a short translation and you don't need any formal review process, because perhaps the project manager does the review him or herself, then there's no need to have a big chain of individual jobs. But then again, if you want to follow up translation by bilingual editing followed by target language proofing and maybe DTP, then of course you're free to add more jobs as you go along. For the sake of clarity, I will only use a single job here. So a translation English to German. We have the default deadline. Well, maybe we can give a little bit more time. Can provide a job description or some additional information. Something like that. We could go back to the file repository and add new files. For example, I could add a project package or further reference files. In this case, we're just providing the original file that was submitted for translation, and we're going to save the job as it is. And of course the next step is to post this to somebody, where we need to search for resources. Now here again, for the sake of clarity, we're just using 2 resources on the system: Thomas Translator, Mr. Sample Resource. That's a chap which we're going to be using for this for the purpose of projects and also for this purpose of trainings. Normally you would see all the resources in your network, and translators, proofreaders, editors, and so on and so forth, and they will register for your network, so you don't have to type all those details yourself. And what you see here is information on that particular resource. So here we see, for example, that Thomas Translator lives in Germany, and we see some quality metrics which I will touch upon briefly. If you click on this tab, you can see the details of Thomas Translator. You see some statistics. You see also the areas of specialization, quite impressive here, which we've set up, of course, so we can use them for demo purposes. And we can also display the history, the job history, where you will see active and past jobs. And we can also see that Mr. Translator has done very well with average ratings very close to 100%. So we can do this for every resource, and then we can post a job to a single resource or in fact to multiple resources, which we're going to do here. And you can also look at target pricing. We can change that around, see what that does to the totals, or we could even increase it a bit, because Thomas Translator has done more jobs, and that would result in those figures. We can also work with flat prices, and of course have a little typo, in which case the system will warn us and say, hey, you can't possibly be paying 1,800 euros for a job that's worth maybe 300. So you get a warning message, but you would still be able to post that job if you so wish, or if you had to do that. So we select the checked resources and we post those jobs. What happens in the background is that emails are sent out to the resources, inviting them to log into the service pages and to check the job offer. Max Manager can check the status of the job. Notices have been sent to 2 people, and those 2 people have not yet looked at this job. Emails have gone out, they've been invited to check the service pages, and that's what we're going to do right now. So the job offer is displayed on the service page of the resource, and we go in. First of all, to see that job, the translator has to accept the terms and conditions, and then you see the job description and you read the job description and confirm that you have done so. And there's 2 things you can do. You can reject the job offer, saying that you're busy, or you can accept the job offer. In the meantime, let's just freeze this here for a second. Go back to the display for the project manager, and you notice there's a change. Now only 1 is unread and 1 is reading it. So you can follow up as a project manager to what's happening with the jobs that you've posted. And at some point, the translator decides to accept the job offer, confirms that it's doing so bindingly, at which point the project manager will see that the job has been assigned, and he can now go on to the next assignment and look at other tasks that need to be done. So now we take a jump forward by a few hours or a couple of days, and the translator has finished translating the file and is now uploading the translated file, maybe adding some additional information. Note that again, we're not using any email traffic here. We're uploading files again with encryption, so we have a safe upload, so that we don't have to use unencrypted email to explain this, and the system explains to the translator what the next steps are going to be. Once the result is finished and provided, project manager is going to be alerted to the fact that there's a new results file. You note that the communication is there, it's provided. What would happen now is either the project manager will review that file himself, which is what I'm going to do now, or the file could be reviewed within the scope of another job that will be posted as a back-to-back in this process chain. As I said, you're completely free to do likewise. So the next step before we can deliver the file to the customer is we have to provide a QA, a quality assurance evaluation. This is a necessary step which can be done pretty quickly. The 4 main items that the project manager is asked to complete here: was the job complete? Was it delivered on time? Were the parameters fulfilled? And was the formatting okay? If everything was fine, then of course you can also switch those 4 radio buttons in one go. If there were some issues with style, for example, or spelling punctuations, you could also add a remark here, and in this case you would have to indicate who provided that feedback. So here everything was perfect, it was delivered, and the final thing we need to do is we need to upload the file and deliver to the customer, or in fact, if it was everything in order, we could deliver straight through. And now we've delivered to the customer. And again, you see the traffic light. Red was the source file, yellow was the results file, and now we have a delivery file waiting for the customer. It says not yet delivered. In fact, if the customer looks at the current projects on his service page right now, he would see that file. But of course, we're going to alert our customer to the fact that we provided files for download. If you have a customer without a service page, then this would be provided in the form of a URL, of a web link that contains a password and will be available for a limited amount of time. Here we're sending an email which does normally not contain the file that we translated, but it's the notification, hey, the file's ready, you can download it. Let's just go back before we go to the invoice, which is the logical next step. That's why the system proposes that. There's something else I'd like to show you. You now have a timestamp when the email was sent. But what is, of course, more interesting is to find out whether or not the customer has downloaded that. And that's what we're going to do. As you can see, there's a new file ready for download, which we're going to download as being the customer right now. And let's see what happens on our project manager page. Just refresh that page, where you can now see a timestamp when that was downloaded for the first time and by whom. That's an important bit of information to know, particularly when the job delivered was time critical and you delivered very close to the deadline. You want to make sure that your customer got it in time. The final step to do is to create the invoice, and as you will notice, there's hardly anything left to do. What you may want to do is to edit line items if the word count has changed. Let's say we have a final word count that is slightly different from the one we provided as an estimate. And now, of course, it's the precise word count. That's why we take the estimated out. So we now have the exact word count, and we can generate an invoice, which we can send out by email, or we can send out by postal mail, fax, printing it out, depending on what you prefer and, of course, what your tax rules say. The delivery date is typically shown on the invoice, and the date and time that's provided here is taken from the time when you sent the confirmation invoice in email. Right, invoice was created. You can see the invoice number up here. The reason why the field is yellow is because the invoice hasn't been paid yet. We will see that later on in the accounting, the bookkeeping view. And the last thing to do is to conclude the project. And here we're going to create an accounts payable voucher for the translator. This can be, depending on the setup and on the legal framework, this can be a credit note, or it could be an invoice which is created on behalf of the resource. And we pass on a final rating of good, very good, how was the cooperation, and we can request customer feedback, which means that the customer is invited to provide a rating of the service received and of the way the project was handled, and they also have the opportunity to add a testimonial, which, given if you give an authorization, you can use on your public OTM websites. So we conclude the project. Right, now we've concluded the project that we've been looking at, and that leaves me to look at two further sections of the project management interface, one of them being bookkeeping, where you can see all the outstanding invoices, and of course you can quickly check what the totals are. You can also go and check which ones have been unpaid for 30 days or more, which can be as interesting. And if there's a payment received, then you just put it to paid and it'll disappear from that list. But of course this will be listed with the project, and at that point that yellow field which you saw a moment ago went to green for that particular project. You also have accounts payable vouchers, and you can create your own export template by choosing the fields that are available, and in that case you create an export in comma separated value format or Excel format that you can then import into other applications such as Excel. Finally, reports. You can have a breakdown of turnover by project manager, or we can go into, let's say, a yearly view in euros. What do we do? You get the number of jobs, you get your figures, you get also you get an overview of cash flow based on the average number of days until payment of an invoice or payments of an accounts payable voucher. That summarizes our view of OTM. When you need to get more information about the system, help for this page is always a good place to start. There's also a knowledge base which you can access, which we're working on to enlarge, and of course there's a support email where you can send a request to OTM support and they will get back in touch with you. For the moment, thank you very much for your attention and goodbye.